In this episode of Crowdfunding Nerds, we talk about co-labor and reciprocity, the differences between funding and how to treat your backers. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Crafters of dreams in vivid streams, charge on with gallant flair. 6 nights of trade, their mark is made in the board game designer's lair. Andrew leads with valiant heat, his strategy supreme. Sean by his side, ideas collide, a crowdfunding team's dream. Rise, creators, pledge your quests. The game's afoot, be bold in realms of card and dice addressed. Their story shall be told.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined by Sean and not Rick. On this week's episode, we were going to talk about relationships, ministry, and a book that Sean's reading. And I'm kind of super stoked to get into this topic because, maybe Sean, you could just introduce, but what do you mean by ministry? We're talking like church?
Yeah, so I'm reading a book at the moment called The Doreen Principle, and it's a thesis. It was actually written as a theological thesis on financing ministry or financing, you could say charity, but basically Christian works. It's interesting because I think it's something that probably is lacking in a lot of, I suppose, Christian circles. I haven't really thought about it too much.
Well, let me kind of interrupt you right there and ask, like, how is this immediately relevant to crowdfunding? Because I'm sure people are listening and wondering, or, marketing or business and that kind of thing. Like, how will we kind of, where are you going with it is what I'm curious about.
So the book outlines there's really two ways of getting things done or processing finances. One is reciprocity. So the idea is that you pay me and I have an obligation to fulfill a product or service. And then the other end of that is co-labor, where we are partners and you're paying me not because you're really you're endangering me to do something, but we're working together to achieve a goal. So this is how charity works largely. So let's just say that there are, starving kids in Sri Lanka living on the streets, and it's a problem we both want to fix. So someone is going to Sri Lanka and someone's funding it. So it's probably a mixture of funding sources and people getting involved, but there's a problem that we're trying to solve. So it's not so much, oh, you're paying me, and I'm going there and this is like a business and I'm going to be profiting from this. And, if you pay me just £2 more, $2 more, I'll do a better job. It's like, so that's yeah. Kind of more the idea, whilst buying products and services on the other spectrum. And the reason why I think it's relevant to crowdfunding, just to maybe cut to the chase, is I think crowdfunding sort of sits in between those two maybe extremities. It sort of sits between reciprocity, which is sort of just a completely financial, give me something that I want and I get it. And then also this maybe this more charity side of things, where it's like we're in partnership trying to do something in the world.
So when you said ministry, and this is kind of leading because I feel like I know where you're going with it, but when you said ministry in particular, you meant like that co-laboring together to bring about something positive.
As opposed to doing something for financial gain.
Okay, that's really cool. So I'm really excited to dive in, but like, where should we start? I mean, maybe we could talk about the difference, like the difference between doing something for financial gain versus doing something for like a co-laboring ministry type, needing to do something more on an ideological stance. In relation to crowdfunding, like, how is it one and how is it also the other? And where maybe we could talk about where it doesn't line up, right?
Well, I think we could start with an example of Deliverance, right? Because it'd be very easy to use Deliverance as, here's a game with a spiritual or Christian theme. And it could be very easy to say, donate, because we can use this in ministry. But that's not what you've done. It's not what we're going to do, is because we recognize that Deliverance is a business, right? It's a product that we're selling. Its goal isn't necessarily to make converts. The goal is really first and foremost to entertain, and introduce certain spiritual themes which are fun and entertaining. But the real emphasis and the goal is to be a product that brings joy and entertainment first and foremost. So it impacts how you deal with that product in particular. But I think there's principles here that can apply to all products and services that people do through crowdfunding, Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's funny because with Deliverance, it's I actually think if my goal was to like you said, if my goal was to get converts and proselytize, in order to further the Christian faith in the world, let's say, which is, might be a byproduct, let's say, but is not the goal, then I think I would be feeling very dishonest and disingenuous on like two different fronts, because the game is really actually about gaming and entertainment. And so I would be talking to, let's say, Christian leaders. Maybe I stand up at a pastor's convention and it's like, support this ministry, to go across the world or whatever. And what I'm really delivering is entertainment and not really a gospel presentation. And so that's gonna, if anybody looks too deep, that would make them pretty upset on that end. And then, of course, on the other end, you would lose a lot of, we'll say, the secular world that'd be like, well, I don't want that. I want entertainment. I'm not looking to further your religion. And, you've got the, many people that are atheists, agnostic, that would start quoting, Flying Spaghetti Monster 316 or whatever. And just, generally, I would lose them really quick, and that's something that is really counterproductive. But then, even beyond that, there's the concept of, I'm doing this Christian thing, give me money. That is like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I only go to South Park, where there was a South Park episode where they were like, I don't know, I think it was like the Mormon church, and they were trying to kill like the South Park boys or something. And every time the South Park boys would escape, then they would go and like talk on TV to their audience and be like, donate for a rocket launcher, donate for another airplane, and whatever, to try to like, finish off the South Park boys, But I am reminded of so many TV preachers that, like, my grandfather was, very senile and, great Christian man, Cajun dude that, you know, loved God and everything. But he would be duped by TV preachers every chance he got, because he was a little senile and genuinely believed that they were, meaningful, but they're like asking for, the Lord told me to buy a fourth plane and whatever. And, it's like, it's just, man, this is so disingenuous. And I know, a lot of people listening to this probably can resonate with what I'm talking about, but we actually had to take his bank account away from him, take his access to his money away, so that he wouldn't give it all away, because that's what was happening, and he wasn't actually able to feed himself and, you know the basic necessities, right? So I certainly wouldn't want to be disingenuous and say, like, give me money, I'm doing something good, and then really, like, I'm going to build a bigger house with it, or I'm going to, whatever it is that profits me. So I think that approaching, I mean, the very same project approached from a different angle totally changes the perception and the person's willingness to invest into it. And so I think that it's incredibly important when you're crowdfunding something. I know this is quite an extreme example, and that's actually one of the reasons I love using Deliverance, is precisely because it's such an extreme example that, if it applies to Deliverance, it's actually a whole lot easier to apply as maybe a less extreme version to your own product. So you might not be, you know, equating your product with like giving a TV preacher money or something like that that's trying to scam you, or whatever. But you can easily draw a parallel of, like, if I misrepresent my product, then dissatisfaction will result, right? So, and maybe you'll get burned at the stake like me, or maybe not.
But I think what you said there is clear, because that's where you have a misuse of the kind of the position that those so-called preachers are in. It's really the basis of the Protestant Reformation was really around simony, and should churches be charging to like providing products and services so that you can forgive people's sins or whatever. But so we have that abuse on that side, where there's clearly a reciprocity happening when there should be co-labor, and it should be more like a charity. But you also see it on the other side. So you also see it within secular things, right? So you see it when there's actually reciprocity happening, but they sort of pretend to be co-labor. Like, so an example of this would be really sort of infusing or mixing politics with sales. So I think just maybe a contemporary example of this would be like the Rings of Power, right? There was sort of it wasn't well received.
I thought
and
you
the
were going to use a
marketing.
less offensive example, but yeah, Rings of Power, you're going right there.
Well,
Okay, let's do it.
maybe I'll go back to Edward Bernays because he really
No, I
pioneered
mean,
this
I
idea.
want Rings of Power. I
I'll
want
come
to
back
talk
to
about
Rings of
that.
Power, but Edward Bernays was really the advertiser who pioneered this idea of sort of amalgamating your products with politics at the time. So it no longer is about buying my product. It's just, for example, like smoking cigarettes. It's no longer about smoking cigarettes. It's now about smoking cigarettes is now a symbol of a political movement. So back in, I suppose, the 40s when he was operating, he sort of convinced women to smoke cigarettes as part of the suffragette movement. So it became a symbol, political symbol. So now smoking cigarettes is furthering a political agenda. The reason I bring up the Rings of Power is because they applied the exact same philosophy, where when it wasn't well received, they said, well, if you don't like what we're doing, is you must be some type of racist or some phobe of some sort. So therefore, by watching the series, you're fighting the power. You're getting involved in political activism, and it's actually quite disingenuous and dangerous. So it happens on both sides, right? It happens within so-called Christian circles, but then also can happen on a secular level. So it's something to be aware of, and I think it's important because we're in the crowdfunding space where it is crossing both of these lines. We want to make sure that we're sort of positioning ourselves correctly so that we aren't abusing people and manipulating people, making people feel that we are taking advantage of them. I think that's really the key of maybe the overall topic.
Right. I think when you start assassinating your backer's character, then you're probably, you went too far. You done messed up, Ron. So yeah, and we've seen it happen actually. Sometimes people will go to Kickstarter with a board game or another project, and they are absolutely convinced is the best thing since sliced bread, and it ends up turning out that the market, at least in its current form, doesn't like it, because not many people back it or whatever. And there are, in some cases in the past that we've dealt with, people that get very, very upset. There's only one client example that I can think of that was like this, which I'd prefer not to share, but we weren't involved or anything like that. But I just don't want to give airtime to it. And it was something that totally became political. It was like very, very political. It started off with trolls saying that a particular art piece in the game was political, and it wasn't. But the guy running it, who was a very outspoken political dude, he just started trolling all of the people that said that, and it just became a really big thing. Yeah. And then people would back the game if they were one ideology, and they would abandon the game and boycott it if they were another ideology. And that's just that is not a recipe for success, certainly not a recipe for long-term success. And I think that in this case, actually, the person that did this kind of stepped out of the industry shortly after, honestly, actually, even before fulfilling the project, which is about as specific as I'll get to the what it actually was. And I think that maybe the person did that because they were just, on the way out anyway. So they decided to burn all the boats. They didn't care, you can't hurt me now. I'm just going to say whatever I want to say. And it, while certainly, in the US, we have freedom of speech, we don't have, I don't know what it is. We don't have to agree, with the said speech. So, yeah. So in general, if you want to develop a long-term relationship, so that was something that you used, relationship, right? It seems like what your kind of, this book at least is talking about is kind of like a transactional relationship, where our relationship is based upon the transaction that you make with me. I like you if you transact with me, and I don't care about you if you don't transact with me. You're not part of the conversation unless you do. And then there's the other piece that seems more like we're working together to, like, almost like in a way, like a grassroots movement. I kind of consider Deliverance to be, I call it sometimes a grassroots movement, because Christian games are generally bad and Deliverance is really good. And I'm kind of, I feel like in a way that we're leading the charge on showing people what's possible, with a theme like this, and how it can be treated so that people actually enjoy it and so on. And that feels a lot more, like you said, co-laboring, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that there are many other great examples of companies that do a great job co-laboring with their people. Chip Theory Games, the first one that comes to mind. They have, I've heard it described by their staff this way, as like, it's almost like a cult-like following, just because they love their fans love all the products they make. As soon as they make a new product, it's like, the only question is, can I afford it? Not do I want to buy it right now, or like, what pledge tier can I afford? And so that's a huge piece. Brotherwise Games is the same. You've got Stonemeyer Games, and a lot of other really great examples of people that are very, very loyal and good to imitate. And I'm actually trying to do the same thing. I'm trying to imitate more, the great companies, and really kind of try to bring my fans along with me for the journey. And I actually think that that's why we're in contention for these Board Game Geek user voted games, because our fans are very active, generally very, excited, and I've worked very, very diligently to do that, over the years, from when we went public in like 2018 all the way. I think I've only missed one email in a month. I've done a monthly email since about 2018 that has never ever missed a single month, until I want to say January of this year. And I'm like, Sean, help. I was getting too busy, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that there's a payoff for that. Not just, writing an email, but also the way that I write it, what I say, it's all directed toward my fan, like the one person reading it. It's like everybody gets, I send out an email and it goes to like 6,000 people or whatever. Well, every one person reading it, I actually even use the phrase you, not you all, because I know that I'm sending it to y'all, but you are the one reading it. And so I'm talking to you. And I think that that's really important. Just,
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
yeah, just to recognize that you're not a part of a herd of cattle that I'm moving from one pen to another for money.
You're a
But it's like,
consumer.
we're doing this together, we and you, and that sort of thing. I think that's really
And
important.
that's why I think it's also important you don't talk about your customers as consumers, because it kind of has that kind of idea of herding cattle. These are my consumers. I'm going to feed them up for slaughter, and then I'm going to make a profit. So I hate that term. I don't like it. I understand people use it, but I think there's better terms to use there. But I think this idea of this is why it's really important that your game, especially for crowdfunding, taps into an untapped market, because you're really trying to create this sense that people want this to exist. So it's like I'm sort of co-laboring with you. I'm partnering with you because I really want this thing which doesn't exist to exist. So a lot of this could be tapping into certain niches, or even certain games that have a loyal following, like have like nostalgia around them. I'll give an example, like Naughty Dog's Jack and Dexter series, which is like a platform on the PlayStation 2 I played growing up as a kid, and I really enjoyed those games. But that's sort of a known community that's been underserved. There's people today who still follow these games because they dropped the series. They didn't continue to create these games. So there's even like fan made projects of trying to create them. So this is a community that's just sort of like frothing at them out for like another game within that series. And I guarantee you, if someone said, "Oh yeah, I've got this board game or this tabletop role playing game that basically looks the same, and it's very similar." I think one person who's been really good at doing this is Gabe with his games. Games for One, I think his publishing company is called.
Gabe Barrett, and his solo game of the month on GameFound.
Yeah, so he taps into a lot of kind of like IPs and nostalgia things. But that's kind of the idea. You create a game that maybe has similar aesthetics or similar theme that you kind of know it's based off that. And then people are like, yes, I want this to exist. And then, they jump behind it. It's probably also why a lot of these big IP games, so for example, Avatar: Legend of Aang, the tabletop role-playing game, did so well, is because a lot of people really love that world, love that universe, feel like this needs to exist on the tabletop, and therefore when it's released, it explodes.
So yeah, what you're talking about in business is it's called the blue ocean strategy. So the red ocean is filled with, the ocean is filled with sharks, and the red ocean is the section filled with blood in the water, and it's like sharks eating each other. You know, the bigger shark eats the smaller shark, the smaller shark eats the fish, and so on. And the blue ocean is like an entirely untapped section that, or maybe even reaching people in a new way that where you don't really have direct competitors. And I would say that for Deliverance, one of the things that I felt was very, in fact, I did not share the secret sauce of how the game was made, because I felt like we had two things going for us. And now actually after releasing, I realized we have three going for us. One, that I thought was like, hey, we're doing the theme. The theme was like a unique selling point. Massive Darkness 2 did an Angels versus Demons thing. I think the Fricks Elias brothers with Fricks Games did like an Angels versus Demons type game that was more like a strategic, like 1v1 skirmish where one side took angels, the other side took demons, and you battled it out. But generally, it's a very underserved theme. But when you add in the fact that it tries to be theologically sound as a fantasy game, and that's one area of differentiation. So some people will just latch onto the theme and say, I don't have anything like this on my shelf, therefore I'm gonna grab it. Then you have the other elements are actually gameplay related. So there are two, and this is really what it boils down to, is innovation. So I think theme and innovation are the two things that cause people to say, yes, more, well, I say that allow you to tap into like a blue ocean strategy. So innovation, I've got Chronicles of Crime, the Millennium series behind me by who is that does Chronicles of Crime? I know people are going to be, like, oh yeah.
Is that the Lucky Duck?
Yeah, Lucky Duck Games. They innovated by creating a really cool app, and they used that app as like a base in games like Destiny's, Chronicles of Crime, and others. And they have really leveraged a cool piece of technology, which is the cell phone, the smartphone, to use in their games. And it's actually quite fun and engaging to play. And there's nothing else like it. So so that's one way they innovated. But with Deliverance, the way that we tried to innovate is through this the requirement that you have to balance tactical combat on a board. So you're skirmishing, dudes on a map skirmishing against good guys against bad guys, and you have to balance the combat against the darkness track, which is something that threatens you that you can't smack with your sword. So you have to balance your limited number of actions against the demons on the board, which is how you actually win the game, by beating all the demons. But then you have to balance against the threat of the darkness cards, which you have to get rid of in a different manner, or you have to let them cripple you in some way that you find appropriate enough to continue battling with the demons. And so that's one area of innovation that I thought from the very beginning, I'm not going to share this until I get far enough ahead that nobody can copy me. And, because I felt like, every game in this niche, like Zombicide, whatever, they had, generally it was move forward, attack, capture objectives, hold, capture points, capture the flag, whatever it was. But all you're doing the whole time is pressing your biggest, strongest button, and, or charging up so that you can press your biggest, strongest button, or holding your resources back so at the right time you can press your biggest, strongest button. And it is very limited. And a lot of the time games in the past, even like Massive Darkness 2, they turn your character into a little mini game, so that if you want, like, I don't know, to use an example that's really familiar to you, a warrior builds rage. So if your rage is 10 and you hit execute, then you're not going to hit very hard. But if your rage builds to 100 and you hit execute, you're going to hit, like, you're just going to deal crazy amounts of damage. And so it's a matter of, like, the mini game on this one character is managing rage, and that's Too Many Bones does it the same, where they have certain characters that are very tropish, like that, and which is fine, but that's how they get the monotonous press the biggest button to be, not quite as easy to do. It's like you have to plan, you have to build your rage, and then when you press your biggest button, you feel like you have accomplished something, and all this planning that you did culminated into a successful, pressing your biggest button. So anyway, that was one area that I thought we innovated, that I was, I don't mean to sound cocky or anything like that. I certainly don't mean it this way, but I believe we were proven right by our player base. They felt that was very innovative. And the second way that I didn't realize was innovative was the way that we have our characters. The angels that you play have they have 5 abilities. One is the same on every character, but 4 are very different. And that's that in and of itself isn't super special. I did have had some people say they're glad that all of the actions you can do are on the character card, which, sometimes you've got basic actions of you can move, you can attack, you can, change your equipment, or you can do the things on your character card. So you have to remember what's in the rule book or look at the quick reference card and your character card. So it's kind of like you have character card part 1 and part 2. So there's that, but the innovation actually comes in the way that you build talents and treasure. So the way that your angel starts in one position, which is the same, but then the way you build it into a very unique build every time. So you could play the same character like 20 times, and you would have 20 different situations that you're playing against and 20 different build styles that you went for. And you're like, oh, cool, I get to do, like Azrael, the angel of death. One time you're playing him as like a plague turret where you're sitting far back and dealing crazy high damage attacks, and that's all you want to use your resources for is to attack. And then you're like a healer tank the next game. It's like it's really cool to be a frontline like healer tank. And then the next game you're like a Grim Reaper rogue style character, and it's just very, very different. And the way that you develop all of these things has been that I think actually that's a lot of people's very favorite thing about the game, is that the way that you customize your characters feels different every single time. And I think that these things are, and there was a point to this, this whole blue ocean strategy. I think that every game you should try, if there's some games that are just going to be filler games that might kind of tap into, like you said, nostalgia, or maybe some element of like, oh, these mechanics are combined in a new way, and that's kind of interesting. So it feels like Agricola, but it plays in 15 minutes or whatever. That's fine. But I think that your audience, in order to really get a group that is willing, of fans that's willing to co-labor with you, there has to be something like enough there in a particular product or maybe a particular company to like sink your teeth into. So this is where, and what I mean by that is that you need to have a group of people that are interested enough and that can actually play your game enough that they care. Because a lot of the time, people will get a game, it's from Kickstarter, they'll play it like 2 times and they're on to the next thing, and they intend to get back to it and they think it was really fun, but there's not really enough going on that they're like, fan theorizing new characters, new missions and whatnot. And that's really kind of what you need in order, like, that's what I mean by sink your teeth into that. It has to be meaty enough that there's enough to do in there that it's, that people can latch on and say, I am a Gloomhaven player, or I play Twilight Imperium, or I play Deliverance, or whatever. So that,
yeah, and I
think
suppose
that those
World
are
of
all
Warcraft is probably a good example of that kind of meatiness, where
Mhm.
you had people who just played solo, they just did questing and maybe try to level up the characters. You had people who just did auction house and they just kind of like try to
Mhm.
own everything on the auction house and maximize that. You had people who were hardcore raiders, just want to be the first on the server to down the biggest meanest monsters on the realm. And then you have
Mhm.
PvPers who just wanted to be the top of the leaderboards and ranks. So there's an example of where people can sort of niche down into something that's very, obviously that's an MMO, so it's huge, but it's an example of where people can really jump in and dive into those sort of meteor things, and in some cases even create a livelihood from covering certain content. It is people who on YouTube who just make a living, or subsidize a living by making lore videos about the Warcraft universe or whatever. So
Yeah. And I think that you mentioned World of Warcraft, which is probably, in some cases, it's like the most unfair example because they have everything for everyone. It's like you could, if you want a PvP, but if you just want a solo PvP, then you've got Battlegrounds. Or if you want to be hardcore focused PvP, you've got Arena. Or you could go World PvP and whatever. And so there's so many different flavors to each thing now, but it wasn't always that way. And I think that
a lot of that
over
evolved from the player base,
yeah,
right?
right. And over time, that's what I was going to say. Like with any game, any franchise, you kind of earn that over time. And I know there's I'll say envy is something that board game designers, video game designers, it's common to feel envious of people that are further ahead than you are. Maybe they have a game that's very similar. They're like, to yours, but like for example, I'll use a personal example that I think is really awesome. So I love this game called the Isofarian Guard. It's really, really fun. It's like my Grail. If Deliverance wasn't my Grail game, it would be the Isofarian Guard. It's kind of like Skyrim, that actually feels like Skyrim, and super high quality components and a really meaty, chonky campaign to play through, and tons and tons of fun, like stuff you can build and whatnot. So that's my personal like favorite ever. And I remember there actually back in 2015, I backed their first Kickstarter campaign. It was for the Stonebound Saga, which was the we'll say the lore base for the Isofarian Guard. And that they had the Stonebound Saga, they had a reprint with an expansion, then they had the first printing of the Isofarian Guard, and I think that was my first client as a crowdfunding guy. It was the very first one he took on. It was in 2019, and then in 2023, I want to say late 2023, or maybe it was I can't remember, or early 2024. It's like all the time blends together now. The Isofarian Guard went back and did a reprint on GameFound and raised $1 million. And I looked and I'm like, I've got an expansion coming up, whatever. And I'm like, I want to raise $1 million for my expansion. And that's kind of it's easy to be envious of something like that. And if Eric, if you're listening to this, I think you're awesome, and I want you to keep crushing it and keep outperforming, or exceeding expectations, and doing a great job with your products. But the it's easy to be envious and say, I wish that was me. I deserve to be there. I deserve to make $1 million and whatever. But in actuality, you have to earn that, like one fan at a time. Earn that like one new play at a time. And there's a lot of groundwork that has gone into the Isofarian Guard, in addition to it being very innovative, very thematically fun and interesting and deep. It also had, they put their time in. They really put a lot of time in, and I think that they're rewarded for that. Just as one example, right? I mean, obviously another example would be Frosthaven. Frosthaven is in essence we'll say a re-implementation of Gloomhaven, and they were greatly rewarded for that because they built a huge player base, and they came out with a game that was great after that gave people more of what they wanted, that eased up some of the issues that they had with the first game and so on. And I'm glad they're rewarded for that. That's innovation and effort being rewarded. Feels good, but it's, I don't know why I tangented into that, but it just felt like worth sharing, but well, I guess maybe the point is, to bring it back to what is that you were saying, you've got a lot of these people co-labored with their fans. They were like, what do you guys want? We're going to do this, and we're going to do it better than we did last time and whatever. Maybe even back to the Isofarian Guard, they reprinted their game, and they added new things for existing backers that really delighted them. And there were like 6 major new pieces. One of them was like new equipment. One of them was more abilities and other things like that. And those were all things the players really wanted, and that, just delighted them. But that didn't come from no information and just hitting the mark correctly, like as a dart player, putting a blindfold on, throwing the dart and hitting a bullseye. That came from diligently working to understand what their players wanted, what their players liked about the game, what the players were frustrated about in regard to the game, and so on. So there you go.
So we've covered the collab section quite a lot, so hitting over the head. But then we must also remember within the crowdfunding space, the reciprocity section as well. So as the creator of Deliverance, you have an obligation to provide the product at the end of the day and to make sure it gets to people's hands. And this is where knowing your numbers is really key, right? So making sure that you can fulfill that obligation and give people the product in a timely way, in a way that satisfies them.
Right. And actually, on the other end of the coin, there are the fans, and the reciprocity that they kind of their responsibility, we'll say. So it's my responsibility to deliver what I promised. Certainly, if I have a Kickstarter, to deliver what I promised, to work toward delighting my fans so they want to buy more things. I talked about last week the feedback survey, which actually has twice as many responses on it. We could talk about that a little bit more if we wanted, but the feedback survey was meant for me to try to make as much money as possible during our next Kickstarter. And I defined that as like what I meant by that was if I give my fans what they want, if I delight them with the various things in the expansion, the various things that are part of that campaign, then they'll want to back it. They'll want to, spend more to get that extra add-on, or they'll be more likely to kind of plan for when the Kickstarter's running, they're going to save their money up and buy and that sort of thing. So if I can do a better job, giving them what they want, then they're going to in return reward me with actually backing the game, or being more likely to back the game, more likely to pay more, right? So there's this element of reciprocity that is, I don't want to say expected, but that's what I'm working toward when I send an email and I update people, when I keep people updated in a Facebook group and other things like that. And I think that there's probably no more powerful way to explain, or rather exhibit, this concept of reciprocity than sending an email. As you think about it, a lot of people listening to this, the most difficult thing that they do is actually hit the send button on their monthly email, or weekly, or whatever, quarterly update, that kind of thing. I find the reason for that is because they don't want to annoy people, and they feel like every single unsubscribe off of their email list is horrid. And it's something that I find to be a little bit of there's oftentimes a misunderstanding of like, why are you sending this email? It's not for the people. It's so you don't want to not send an email because you're going to get unsubscribed. You want to send an email to keep your fans in the loop, and then those who are not interested in receiving your communication, they should unsubscribe. Like the people that aren't interested in receiving an email from you, if they're not interested in receiving, I mean, it is possible that they are a part of a, let's say, your Discord server, and they prefer to get communication that way, or a part of Facebook group, or a Board Game Geek community. But a lot of the time when people receive an email, or maybe they get Kickstarter updates is another place that's common. So maybe they unsubscribe because they're getting information in multiple places and they just want to keep their inbox clean and whatnot. But a lot of the time they unsubscribe is because they're no longer interested in what it is that you're sharing. And those people, they don't plan on supporting you, as a general rule. Like if they're not willing to receive an email from you, they're not going to pay you $100 for, they're not going to pay me $70 for a Deliverance expansion, or $129 for the all in, or whatever. They're going to just be kind of almost like they're going to slow me down, so like as an example, I have sent I want to say 3 emails in the last week. And the reason I've sent 3 emails, I've sent 4 actually. So I sent the Golden Geek Award information, and this is a little longer than a week, right? But just in the last, we'll say like in the last month. So I sent an April email. Then a week later, I sent the Golden Geek Award vote, where we actually, were nominated for 5 Golden Geek Awards. Then later on, a week or so after that, May 4th, I sent our May email to our main list, and that featured the Golden Geek again, and some other things like just some new art and whatnot. And then 4 days after that, I did a resend of the main email to the people who received it but didn't open it. And then I separate out on the same day. I actually sent another email to what I call my never openers, the people that rarely open emails. And then I'm going to send another email in a few days, which will, detail the golden, a little bit more about the Golden Geeks. And that is a lot of emails, but I have a purpose to each one, and maybe we could even dedicate a whole episode to why I sent this one and that one and the other. But every single one of them, like the Golden Geek Awards, I ended up sending to like 4,400 people. In fact, I'm going to look at the report for this so that we can get it live.
And tell us your
And
unsubscribers as well, if you got any.
why not? I'm going to share my screen as well. So anybody that would like to take a look on YouTube can actually do this. So I have 19 people unsubscribed. So I have 4,281 people that received it, to almost 2,100 opened, and 19 of them subscribed. 2 of them even marked it as abuse. So that's, that they didn't sign up for the list, or that it was spammy, or that kind of thing. Then let me get back to the campaigns. I'll look at the next report. So this May email, so that was Golden Geek Award vote. Then the May email I sent a week later, and I received almost half of the people that received this email opened it, which is really high. And this is generally, a lot of the, our generally our hardcore fans. Of course, MailChimp decides to take a while to load. All right, so 2,133 people opened this one, 4,285 recipients. So we've had some people jump on, some people jump off, another 19 unsubscribed. So I've had now 38 people unsubscribe within a week. I did a resend. Let's look at how many unsubscribed there. MailChimp is slow. All right, so 5 more unsubscribed there. I had fewer people receive this one, but 5 people unsubscribed. And then let's just switch the report to the never openers. So this was the May resend. So I've had 43 now unsubscribe. And then this never opener email, probably have a few more unsubscribe as well. Let's see. Okay, 2 more. So I've had 45 people unsubscribe from my list. And that is, looking at my list in general, is about 1% of my list, maybe just a little higher than 1% of the, well, I guess I have, let's see, audience, dashboard. So I have 5,600 people on my email list. And, there are some extras that are contacts that have either unsubscribed or whatever. I have to archive those. But that's a lot of unsubscribes. So, but the reason, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now. The reason that I had all those unsubscribes is because I'm communicating with my fans, and I expect the fans want to receive that communication. That's why I send it, because I have useful things to say, not just sending emails for no reason. There's a purpose to why I send each one. And the fans, like, I owe it to them to communicate. And in return, I believe that my hardcore fans are going to pay me back with engagement. Like, they're going to engage. Like, if I'm like, hey, we've got a really important award I'd really love to win. Like, we've been nominated for 5, which puts us in like the same category as Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones was nominated for 5 awards for their year for the Golden Geek, I want to say, and they didn't win any. But they were nominated for 5, and that's always going to be on Deliverance. We're going to be nominated for 5, but hopefully we can win one. And I really want to try to do that. And the only way, or we're way smaller than some of these other companies that are nominated, but our fans are hardcore, and now's the time. If they're going to act, like, now's the time that it really means something. So, there are other times like that, like when you're about to launch your Kickstarter, you hit the launch button. Like, I don't want to say that fans owe it to you to back you, but that's what you've been working toward. And so with the email, it's not exactly like an I expect that you are going to back me when I send this email. It's not their requirement or their responsibility, but that's what you're working toward. What would you call that? I don't know.
Yeah, so even with your unsubscribers, it's still worth sending those out, as you said, because you have a goal. And, if people aren't going to back you now, support you now, they're not going to support you ever. I think this comes down to this concept is that before people give you their money, they give you their attention, they give you their time. So this really is important when it comes to your organic marketing. If you're finding it really difficult just to get your game to kick off organically, it might be because people aren't really too interested, and you might need to tweak things or change things or try a different approach. So your organic marketing could be it's really an indicator if people are going to back eventually. So people give you their time before they give you their money. So it's good to sort of sift the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, and kind of, have those that are going to be invested and are involved in your community. So not being afraid of, people rejecting or disliking the game.
Right. Yeah. I think that there's a big problem with an email list that has an open rate of like 20%. The engagement is rather low. And there are a lot of people that have relegated you to the spam folder. So they don't have to see open, unsubscribe, but you're in the spam folder. So they don't, you're in jail basically in there, from then on. And nothing that you say will reach them. I would rather have had that person unsubscribe, and I want my email open rates to be much higher. And so the technical term for it, I from what I call it, is curation. So you want to continue to curate and really prune, maybe is another term, your email list and even your communities. One common thing that I found that I'm not sure if it hurts us or anything, but our Discord server, when I started our Discord server for Deliverance, I wanted everybody to join it, and there are a lot of people that joined the Discord server because I asked them to, that had really that never used Discord, or maybe that use Discord for very particular things, and they just muted my server immediately so they don't get notifications and whatnot. But if I send, and what I've noticed is, like, if I send out in the past, our Discord is fairly active now because we have Tabletop Simulator and which is good digital mod, and we're playtesting, and people actually have the game in hand so they can ask questions and that kind of thing. So that's what generally how it gets used. But before people actually had their games in hand, it had very low engagement. It had like 700 members or 600 members, but only 20 would engage on a regular basis. And I was like, I don't know if this was a good idea to invite everyone into this server, So it was really an interesting thing. And now, we've got a fair amount of people, like, online on a regular basis, and that kind of thing.
But you also had quite a thriving Facebook group, so you sort of knew that there was a community space that existed on Facebook. It could possibly exist on Discord as well. So
yep, yeah.
So yeah,
So
you already knew that people were willing to give you their attention. That sort of instance.
Yeah, and in this feedback survey, I found it to be very interesting, actually. So last week I talked about how we did a survey, and I went through it with Jack Dunbar to really kind of break down the information that I gained from it. But since I did that, I sent an email out that asked my email subscribers to jump on the survey as well. And the some of these questions were dramatically altered when I brought my email subscribers in, and it was very interesting. So probably the most interesting that was just right on the surface was the first question was, how do you prefer to get updates about Deliverance? Email was like, I want to say over 60% of respondents said that email was more important. When I sent the email, that number jumped to 85%.
Wow. Okay.
So it was huge, right? And the number of people interested in Kickstarter updates, percentage-wise dropped from like, or maybe it kind of remained the same, we'll say, at 40, roughly like 47% of the people that prefer to get updates about Deliverance, they like Kickstarter updates.
What was the lowest?
So, what was really interesting? I believe it was Board Game Geek. But
interesting.
And it was it wasn't like completely blown out of the water or anything like that. But this also, like, one thing to kind of consider with the question, the way that I framed the question is, how do you prefer to get updates? You may prefer to go to Board Game Geek for rules clarifications or other things like that, but maybe not to actually get updates about a game.
Mm-hmm.
So that your mileage may vary depending on how you ask questions, right? But the one thing I noticed also was that the Discord community more people preferred getting updates on Discord than they did on Facebook. And after I sent the email, that number, Facebook caught up. So now,
Okay.
out of the 403 respondents as of this moment, you had 79 people say they wanted or they preferred the Facebook group, and 78 people said the Discord community. Whereas before it was, which is roughly 19.5% of my respondents each were happy with that. Board Game Geek is at 75. So it's also very close to Facebook, Discord, and I think that the type of people that are on Board Game Geek are actually, Board Game Geek, Discord, and Facebook are actually wildly different in demographics. So I didn't ask them what their demographics were, but I would be very, very interested to learn that. I mean, my suspicion is that Facebook is like an older crowd. When I say older crowd, I mean, 30s generally on up. Discord would be probably 30s on down. There are people, of course, that are outliers. And I don't quite know what, Board Game Geek, I think, is more about people that use Board Game Geek all the time. And that's where they generally track things. So that was very interesting. And then the other one that jumped up, which makes a lot of sense with the email list, is, do you own a copy of Deliverance? And I, in parentheses, I said, if not, that's okay. That number was at like 6 point something percent. We'll just say 7%. And it almost doubled to it just in the 13% percentage point. So 13.2% of people.
No, people don't own the game.
Right. So
Okay.
we had 350 people say yes, and 53 people say no. They didn't own the game. And so I was able to asked those people that didn't own the game, what was the most important reason you haven't purchased? And there were 4 major reasons that generally 4 major reasons that just became more like bigger pieces of the pie. But then there were also new answers that actually helped me understand my people, and it was very cool. But generally, like top to bottom, they're trying to decide if the game is for them. They're waiting for the next Kickstarter. Their friends have the game and they play their copy, or they still plan to purchase. They just haven't done so yet. And that was like, choose one, so that was something that also kind of really, really shifted.
And then do you plan on using that information moving forward? So the folks who are like, or I'm undecided yet, are you going to kind of separate those emails out and then send them an email saying, hey, here's why you might want to consider Deliverance. Here's some reviews. Here's a playthrough. Be happy to answer any questions. Be happy to jump on Tabletop Simulator, play a game with you. Is that something that you are planning to do, or are you just going to kind of leave it where it is and just use it as a general data point?
I think that might be a good, so it's a good idea, I think. But what I would rather do, because these people are peppered into, for example, the emails that I already sent and other things like that. And so I generally have decided for myself, and I think that others would probably do well to do the same, or to do likewise, is I've decided that I want to focus on my hardcore fans and really give them what they want. And rather than trying to get the people that are on the fence to jump off the fence, focusing the majority of my time on that, I want to focus the majority of my time on the hardcores, and then also not forget to reference something that will help the people on the fence. I actually look at my people as, there are many people who have told me, and I've heard and seen in many Facebook groups and whatnot, I'll back every game this creator makes, which is a really good sign. Obviously that person is very happy at the time, but it's not a guarantee, right? They haven't backed every game the creator made. They've declared their intent to back. And, we know what is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions or something. I don't know how that phrase goes, but the idea is that I believe that I have to earn that and continue and re-earn every single month and give value every month, so that, opinions change, the circumstances change, yes, but opinions also change. And I think that it's important to work for your hardcore fans to, earn your keep with them, I guess, if that makes sense. So I did have this other thing I wanted to talk about. I wanted to kind of get your perspective on it. It seemed like you were the book that you referenced there was this concept I wanted to go back to it. It was so connection versus closeness. So I am connected to my people because they're on my email list, and that I think puts you in category of a family, right? The relationship of, just like we are, the so I guess maybe relationship equals connection. So if I have a relationship with you, Sean, you're my employee, you're my friend, you're my fan or whatever, right? Then we have a connection. But that doesn't mean that we're close. So I believe that the relationship equals connection, and what is it? Something equals closeness, like the I know the word's going to come to me, but connection does not equal closeness. And if somebody's on your email list, they are connected to you. But it's all about the effort that you put into that relationship that determines how close or how you know, I don't know what sort of state it's in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, devoted, I suppose, or enthusiastic.
Yeah.
The word.
So I've been really pondering that, thinking about that in terms of like actually my children. So I have 7 children, which is a lot of kids, I mean, some I don't know of anybody on the planet that would say that's not a lot of kids, but I'm sure that they exist. But it's a lot, and they're all young children, 11 and under, and so what I was kind of thinking about this, because we're a literal family, and so we're connected, but it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily close to each individual child. But what I need to do as a dad, to be a good dad, I need to develop a relationship with each one of them, or rather cultivate. Maybe cultivation is closeness. I don't know.
Husbandry.
Yeah. So that type of thing is what determines closeness, and I think that it really kind of translates very nicely to fans. Sometimes people don't want that relationship, like my children definitely do. They love daddy. They want to be close to daddy. That's like wired into them, and so I have that going for me, which is nice. But sometimes fans just don't want to have that type of close relationship where they're a hardcore acolyte for low end games or whatever, right? I mean, it's just, yeah, it's a good game, but like I love all the other games too. And
I have a family, I have a religion or whatever. So I think you got to be careful with this terminology, because it can become, I think it can blur boundaries. Like this is where it's important to have these distinctions between collaborators and reciprocity. This reminds me of BlizzCon, where I think it was one BlizzCon, they were talking about how, everyone at Blizzard is one big family and you come to join our family. It's like, hang on, what family do you have to pay to be a part of? It's like everyone has to pay to go to BlizzCon. Everyone has to pay to get their products. Everyone has to pay to be part of this family. So like, I think you got to be careful with some of that terminology. But I understand the sort of sentiment that they're trying to go for. It's like they're a community of people that share common interests. But I think family might not be the right term to like talk about your business.
Right. Yeah, I think that it's
at least
for
it's
me,
a family business. That person should be part of your family.
Yeah. I do agree with that. I think that for me, I've always tried, so 2 things. One point to kind of circle back to, when I talk to my people, I don't consider them my family, but I would bend over backwards to do things for them. And I often do, I try to give them what they want and that kind of thing. It's that fan relationship. The guys and girls who have great ideas for the game, but they're not doing that for me. I recognize they're doing that for the game. Like, and also, I don't know if this is the right way to go about it, but I make everything about the game. Like, we're doing this together for the game. Like the Golden Geek Awards, like the reason you're voting isn't because you think I'm special. It's because you love Deliverance and you want to see it rise higher or whatever. You want other people to discover it. And that's what I'm doing. That's why I am working on this expansion and whatnot, because my Deliverance fans want an expansion and they deserve to get more content and that kind of thing. And it's not about how great I am or how devoted I am to them. it's about how devoted the I am on my side and they are on their side as fans. I'm a fan too, but I'm the one that's kind of like driving the ship or steering the ship rather. And it's all about the game. It's all about advancing the cause of the game, making the, getting expansions for the game, getting better content for the game, getting it refined and so on. And that is something that people can kind of latch onto where it doesn't feel like, I will say like I'm not a cult leader or something. I don't feel that way. I feel like we're all working together, like you said, for this common goal of getting more of this made and elevating it to be the best it can be. And I think that's easier for people to latch onto than I need you to do this for me is a lot harder of an ask than, my mom will do it, because she loves me. But my fans don't love me in the same way my mom loves me. They love the game, right? They love the Deliverance. So I think the thing I sometimes say is keep the main thing. And even in my emails, I will write like, I would love you to do this. And I remove the I, and I say, if you love Deliverance, please do this. Right. And that's the big difference.
Great. Well, we probably should wrap there. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Okay. All right. So I think we have a new way to end, just maybe special for this podcast. And we're just going to go for it. If Dragon Force loved Crowdfunding Nerds, this would be the song.
Crafters of dreams in vivid streams, charge on with gallant flair. 6 nights of trade, their mark is made in the board game designer's lair. Andrew leads with valiant heeds, his strategy supreme. Shone by his side, ideas collide, a crowdfunding team's dream. Rise, creators, pledge your quests. The game's afoot, be bold in realms of card and dice addressed. Their story shall be told. Yeah! Richest designs they twist and bind, a maze of epic lore. Jacob's words like sharpened swords cut through the market's core.